Would you pray with me this morning? God of abundant light and life, we thank you for this day. We thank you for our very lives. And we ask that in this time that your Spirit and that your word would wash over us, and that in you and through you we may find the light that we need in our lives. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you now and forever, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, it's not hard after that wonderful puppet show and our song together to understand that we are talking about as what it means to live Christian today is to live both in the light of Christ, but also to be the light of Christ to others. And some of us have been looking at and studying and discussing the Gospel of John during this Lenten season. And today we hear from the very opening to the Gospel of John, what we refer to as the prologue to that Gospel. And the very first verses that come to us from the author of John are basically like a birth narrative. In Matthew and Luke, we get what we understand as the more traditional Christmas story, the birth narrative that we celebrate each and every year. But John has one as well, but it's a little bit different. The language is much different than we're used to. But John says this about Jesus. John says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people." So in 4 short verses, we pretty much have the totality of the good news of Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ was there before the beginning of the world, is in God, and is that creative force that brought all things into being, all things into life. And we know that if Jesus has this power to bring all things into life, then Jesus certainly has the ability to conquer death and bring about new life. And it says that this life was the light of all people. And it's the 5th verse, the one that's not up here yet, the 5th verse, which is, I think, the totality of the good news of Jesus Christ, which is this: that light, the light of Christ, shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it, cannot overcome it. Now, John likes to speak and write in some pretty crafty and creative imagery. It's not as straightforward. It really makes us think about what he's talking about. It really makes us reflect inwardly into our own lives, because some of the images that he raises, those things aren't going to resonate in the same way with each and every person. They're going to be different for each and every person. And in this prologue, in this very beginning part of the gospel, John uses these terms of darkness and light, and we are called to figure out what that means in our own lives. So it raises the question for us right away of what is the darkness? What is the darkness in our lives, in our world? And Reverend Adam Hamilton gave us a few ideas of what he believes the Gospel of John is referring to when it talks about darkness. He says, first, darkness can be a lack of spiritual connection to God, lack of a relationship with God, almost a sort of spiritual numbness that there's just no sort of relationship, no connection there, which in times of trouble, in times of hurt, we end up feeling very lost. We end up feeling very lonely. We end up feeling like there's no hope because we don't have that connection to something greater than ourselves. And maybe we don't know that the gospel story, that good news of Jesus Christ. And that can leave us in a very hurtful place. Another, he says, is that feeling of despair and hopelessness, which can come along with that, or can come along with many things that we've experienced in our lives. Times when we maybe don't think things can get better, when maybe things snowball on top of us and we feel like it's just one thing after the next after the next. But we don't know that there's an opportunity to look for that light in our lives. And then Reverend Adam Hamilton talks about how what we experience and what we see and hear through the news, through what may have happened to us in our own experiences in our own lives, where we have known that evil exists in our world. And all those things can come together and in different ways act as a darkness or a shadowy place in our lives. So I want you to think for just a second about, in your own life, what is that darkness? Where do you need to see Christ's light shining in your life? Because I know that that's going to be different for each and every person. Because none of our lives are the same. But then I want us to remember that Jesus Christ is the light of the world and will always overcome whatever darkness we are experiencing. That the joy of that 5th verse in the 1st chapter of John can give us all hope that no matter where we are, no matter what is happening, that is not where God is going to leave us. That Jesus is a light that will lead us out of that darkness. And once we have experienced that, once we have been led out of the darkness, then we are called to take on that light and to be a guide and a light for others in the world. The Gospel of Matthew says that we are called to help lead people through the darkness and into that light, into a relationship with Jesus Christ. And in Matthew, we see at the same time that Jesus is preaching his Sermon on the Mount, he offers this wisdom to us and says, you, that's all of us, all of those who follow Christ, we are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. It's the song we just sang. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And how can we do that? How can we be the light of Christ for others? Yesterday, my wife and I were out with Kenneth, and we had been out for most of the day, and we ended up stopping in a little store because Saturday is, in our household, it's treat day. You know, maybe you have that in your household too. So we were stopping in a little store to get our weekly treat to share as a family. And those of you who know my wife, she likes to strike up conversations wherever she goes. And so she began striking up a conversation with the woman that was working behind the counter, and they were having a nice conversation. And of course, we all know yesterday was just this beautiful day, right? You know, the sun was shining. It was almost 60 degrees. People were out and about doing everything. And my wife just happened to, ask the question and say, well, how was business today? Oh, yeah, it was really busy. And she said, but I just got here maybe an hour or so ago. And Emily, who used to work in retail, so she kind of sympathizes and empathizes, she says, well, I hope, you have a really good night. I hope it stays busy for you so, so that the night goes more quickly. And the woman behind the counter said, yeah, I hope so too. But she said, I really hope that the people who come in tonight are a lot nicer than the people who came in this afternoon. And Emily said, well, what happened? And she said, I'm not sure what it was, but she said the woman who was here previously that was working most of the morning and afternoon, she said she was almost in tears because she said just the customers were just being so hard on her and rude and just kind of making life miserable. Now, some of us who have worked in retail or in a lot of our jobs may understand what that's like when you have one of those days where it just seems like, you're trying to help, you're trying to do the right thing, and just all you get is complaints and criticism, and it's tough. And, Emily just offered her, kind of a quick blessing and says, well, I really hope that that isn't the case tonight. And bless you in your time here. And we got our treat and we left, and no more was said. But I kind of felt like in that moment, maybe that was an opportunity to share some of that light of Christ with a person who herself maybe had not experienced that, but had tried to be and help and console the person that she had just been talking with. And I know that many of us know or are involved in situations in our lives where we know somebody that could really use that friendly word, that could use a smile, could use encouragement. Maybe someone they know and love is going through a tough time, or maybe they're taking care of somebody who is sick and is in need of a lot of help and a lot of care. And sometimes the best way that we can be a light is just to be that encouragement, to be that voice that says, don't give up. God is never going to give up on you. God is never going to give up on your loved one. The life that maybe you're experiencing right now that might seem like it's a really hard place, it will get better. God can help you through it. We can help you through it. We can do this together. That's what Matthew 5:14 through 16 is talking about. Experiencing that light that we hear about in the first chapter of John, and then being that light in the world. So that's our challenge this week. It's our challenge for how we can live as Christians and live as Christ followers this week is, how can you be the light of Christ? But I'm going to take that a step further. Remember, in the first week, we talked about living Christian and what it means, and what we talked about was we need to not only say we can do that, but there's another word. It starts with a W. Say it louder. Will. How will we be the light of Christ for others this week? Amen.
shining in the midst of the dark is shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine.